For more than 75 years, the United States has played a leading role in shaping the world. After World War II, it helped rebuild Europe through the Marshall Plan, created global institutions like the United Nations and the World Bank, and built a network of alliances that defined the post-war order, including NATO. The US dollar became the world's reserve currency. Today, it accounts for about 59% of all foreign exchange reserves worldwide, and its military presence stretched across the globe, with approximately 800 military bases in over 70 countries. Its technology, culture, and values reached every corner of the planet. But what happens if that changes? What would the world look like if the United States loses its global hegemony? This kind of shift doesn't happen in one big moment. It's usually a slow process, made up of economic decline, internal political problems, and the rise of new competitors. Right now, we're seeing signs of all three. The US share of global GDP has fallen from almost 40% in the 1960s to less than 25% today, while China's share has grown from less than 2% in 1980 to about 18% now. Inside the country, political division and growing national debt, already surpassing $33 trillion, have weakened trust in institutions. And outside, countries like China, Russia, and growing groups like BRICS+, which includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and others, are pushing back against American influence, economically, diplomatically, and militarily. Let's break it down. One of the biggest areas of impact would be the global role of the dollar. For decades, the US dollar has been the main currency used in international trade, investment, and reserves. That gives the US a huge advantage. It can borrow money cheaply, impose financial sanctions, and control large parts of the global financial system. In 2023, US Treasury securities accounted for more than $7 trillion held by foreign governments and investors. But now, some countries are starting to look for alternatives. China is promoting the yuan in trade deals and has launched its digital yuan pilot programs in several cities, aiming to internationalize its currency. There are even talks of using digital currencies and bilateral swap arrangements to bypass the dollar system entirely. If the dollar loses its dominance, the US could face higher inflation, more expensive borrowing, and less economic influence. This shift would also make it harder for the US government to finance its debt at low interest rates, potentially leading to tougher fiscal choices down the line. Then there's the military dimension. The United States still has the most powerful military in the world, and it spends more on defense than the next 10 countries combined, about $850 billion in 2024 alone, nearly 40% of global military expenditure. It has troops and bases in more than 70 countries, but maintaining that global footprint is expensive, and if its economic power slips, so will its ability to fund and sustain its presence. That opens the door for rivals. China has increased its military spending by over 80% in the last decade and is expanding its naval capabilities in the South China Sea. Russia's military budget is smaller, but it has shown willingness to use force aggressively, as seen in Ukraine. Regional powers like Iran, with its missile programs, or Turkey, with its assertive diplomacy, could pursue their own ambitions without fear of American consequences. The absence of a strong American presence might increase the risk of regional conflicts escalating, making the world a more unstable place. Another major area is global trade and economic leadership. After World War II, the US helped build a system of relatively open markets, predictable rules, and safe sea routes. It backed institutions like the World Trade Organization, which today has 164 member countries, and helped create major trade agreements like NAFTA and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP. But if the US pulls back or is pushed aside, that system could splinter. Countries might turn inward, build exclusive regional trade blocs, or rely more on state control than market forces. For example, China's Belt and Road Initiative has created a network of infrastructure projects across Asia, Africa, and Europe, tying countries closer to Beijing economically and politically. That could make trade more expensive, slow down innovation, and hit developing countries especially hard. For businesses and consumers around the world, that would likely mean higher prices and less variety. Technology is another piece of the puzzle. US companies have led the world in everything from semiconductors and software to biotech and aerospace. The US semiconductor industry alone generated over $50 billion in exports in 2023, but it faces stiff competition from East Asia. But if that edge disappears, maybe due to too much regulation, less investment, or aggressive competition from abroad, America might lose its role as the global tech leader. If other countries set the rules for artificial intelligence, data privacy, or digital infrastructure, the US would be reacting instead of leading. This could have far-reaching effects on everything from national security to the economy and even everyday life. And don't forget about culture and soft power. American movies, music, social media, and universities have shaped global norms for decades. The spread of ideas like free speech, entrepreneurship, and human rights hasn't been perfect, but it's been powerful. If the US loses that influence, the world might shift toward very different models, some of which are more authoritarian, more centralized, or less open. That could lead to a world with more control, more censorship, and fewer shared values. The competition for hearts and minds is increasingly important in a world connected by the internet and global media. Of course, some critics say US hegemony hasn't always been a good thing. They point to military interventions, economic inequality, and global instability. And those criticisms aren't without merit. But historically, when the dominant global power steps back without a strong replacement, what usually follows isn't peace, it's uncertainty. When the Roman Empire fell, Europe entered centuries of fragmentation. When the British Empire declined, it left power vacuums that helped spark World War I and World War II. A sudden collapse of US influence could have real, unpredictable consequences. Still, it's important to remember, this isn't a done deal. The US still has huge advantages. World-class universities that attract hundreds of thousands of international students each year, deep capital markets with trillions in assets, strong demographics compared to aging rivals, and an entrepreneurial culture that encourages reinvention. But keeping its global role means making real changes at home. It means investing in innovation, rebuilding public trust, making smart economic decisions, and staying engaged in the world. Otherwise, the decline could accelerate faster than expected. Hegemony isn't just about being the strongest, it's about having a vision that others are willing to follow. If the US loses that vision, it might lose more than just its place at the top. It could lose the system it helped create. So the big question isn't whether US hegemony will end. It's how the country will adapt to a world that's no longer unipolar. Can it lead alongside others? Can it stay open, flexible, and competitive in a more complex global system? Those answers depend on leadership, both at home and abroad. But one thing is clear, if the US steps back, someone or something will step in. And that shift could change everything. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let in the comments, what do you think a post-American world would actually look like?